on the hour someplace else. We have a program this morning, and our presenter is actually a square dance caller, unlike last week, although that seemed to be an interesting thing, and I will try to find appropriate people, um, other parallel systems too. But, and I see we have several continents and countries represented, which is great. Um, this morning, we're going to be talking about, no, we're not. Yeah, we are after the presentation, relationships, whatever that means. We'll find out. That's why we're here. But our presenter has presented for us once before, and at that time I checked and he was 15-year caller. Is it 16 yet, Barry? Or
if you count this last year of no activity, sure.
yeah, of course. How many years since you started? um, by day, a software engineer. By night, a square dance caller, etc. Like the rest of us, although some of us do it during the day too. Barry's done some work with the National Square Dance Convention. He's the advertising chairman for the 2024 that's coming up. As far as calling, he's on the member of Color Lab and on the board of governors of Color Lab, and probably lots of other things I could say about it, but I'd rather have him talk about relationships. So here from Illinois, heading for Wisconsin, Minnesota. Let's have a hand for Barry Johnson. It's all yours, Barry.
All right, let's see. Try and share my. Could you, Don? Could you allow me to share my screen, please?
No, I can't, but
Okay.
Dan can.
Dan, please.
Oh,
Give that a whirl, if you would, please.
All right.
And Yolanda's about to ask for permission to record, I think.
yes.
Okay, so a little bit rusty at giving this presentation. It'll be interesting to see how it goes today as we all sort of knock the rust off of everything. I tried to make it short. I tried to cut out information, but it was like cutting away pieces dear to my heart. And so I'm just going to say, I'm going to throw a whole bunch of stuff at you today. If you feel like you're not getting all of it, that's okay. It's going to be coming perhaps a little too quickly, but I wanted to give everybody a sense as to where some of the treasures are with some of this, even for those people that may have some experience with looking at relationships as they call. So there's going to be kind of a broad scope of information here. At the end, we'll have some resources on where to go to find more information if you'd like to pick up. If you feel there's some value and want to invest more time in this, we'll help you do that. Decades ago, we settled on using 4 principal characteristics to describe the setup of a square: formation, arrangement, and relationship. For callers, formation and arrangement are usually pretty easy to see, and sequence is visible. It's a little harder for some callers to see, but in general, we can look at squares and we can see formation, arrangement, and sequence. It's been hard for callers to look at a square and see relationships. We're going to help with that today. As I understand it, caller schools in the 60s and 70s often taught relationships. I've heard stories by long experienced callers about how some of the national caller schools sort of pounded relationships into people's understanding. But that kind of went away in favor of some of the flowcharty type, I call them mechanical methods for resolving. And then a kudo to Don and his mental image system, which really was sort of revolutionary when you came out with it. I believe your book came out in 1983, if I remember right. You know, and so it kind of turned attention away from relationships for a while. But what we're seeing now is that the last several years, people are starting to focus more at it again. In fact, we're seeing some of our official naming nomenclature for formations and arrangements begin to include relationships as a principal part of the name, partner lines, corner lines, etc. But as a result of, you know, because we stopped training, because we stopped emphasizing it, many callers really don't know about how to tell the relationships of dancers in a square. Or if they do, they don't know kind of how it works or why it works, or they don't even realize that they're using it without understanding. You know, a lot of very experienced callers use these techniques, but simply never had the words for them. But I'm going to claim, and I hope that you'll see at the end, that as we go to do things like resolving the square, I'm going to claim that relationships are perhaps even more valuable than formations, arrangements, or sequence, because if you know the relationship, the rest becomes easy. All right, so formation, just, you know, to make sure everybody's at the same playing field here. Formation is sort of the shape of the dancers in the square, including their facing direction. Are they in lines facing? Are they in out facing lines? Are they in parallel waves? Is it a quarter tag, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Arrangement would be the order of men and women within a group. Are they normal couples, half sashayed, etc.? Sequence, are they in the same order, the same circular order as when the square started? Men can be in sequence or out. Ladies can be in sequence or out. Those are the only two choices. Relationships essentially measure how far around the square the ladies have chained. You know, are they halfway across from their original partner? Are they 3/4 of the way around? Are they 1/4 of the way around? Or are they generally with their original partner? Relationships gives us, we don't use those words, how far people have changed, but that's essentially what the relationship is measuring here. The terminology that was determined when we started talking about phaser and how to identify it turned out to sort of intermingle sequence and relationship together. And you also have to have sort of a reference dancer to describe what the relationship is. It's, you say, well, my number one man is next to his corner and we're out of sequence, so that means, you know, it got tangled up. The terminology really didn't help matters. So what we're going to do today, we're going to describe relationships a little bit differently, help you see them as easily, I hope, as you see formation and arrangement. We're going to talk about how you can use them, and then look at some ways that if you know what the relationship is, here's some easy ways to help manage the square to drive the dancers to a position, to a setup that you want, intentionally getting there instead of having to fumble and find it almost by accident. You might be asking why we care. Well, a few things that can help. If you know the current relationship group, it's very easy to resolve to corners. Very easy. If you know the process for how you change from one relationship group to another, well, first, those processes are easy to learn. But second, they give you the chance to really control relationships in the same way that you might control formation. You know that you start people in waves and you know how to take them out of waves and put them back into waves. Well, you can do the same thing with relationships. You can take somebody from, say, a partner setup into an opposite lady setup, over to a right-hand lady setup, over to a corner setup at the times of your choosing, instead of just seeing what happens when you call. And then finally, once you start thinking about things in terms of relationships, then many of the tools that we use, certain modules, magic modules, and so on, you find new ways to use those same tools with very predictable results. And because the results are predictable, suddenly you can start using these things in ways you never thought you could use them before for specific purposes. Kind of magic. So the fundamental principle behind relationship says, as long as you use symmetric choreography, don't be going into, head man with your corners starred through, square up like that and expect this to work. That's not going to be there. As long as you use symmetric choreography, anytime you mentally split the square into two side-by-side groups of four, then exactly one of these four statements will be true. Every person's partner will be in that same group, the same group of four with each person. Every person's corner will be in the group, or every person's opposite man be in the group. Every person's right-hand lady, or if you think of it as left-hand man, they will be in the group. One of those four cases will be true at any given moment in time. Now, as you move dancers around, the one that's true can change. That's the way of changing relationships. But we use that when everybody's partner is in their group, we say that they're in a partner group. When everybody's corner is within the group, we say that they're in a corner group. Surprise, surprise. Right-hand lady group, opposite lady group. We describe who's in that square together with each individual dancer. Now, if you're in a partner group, think heads lead right, for example. You've got two facing couples. Everybody's partner is in their group. You also happen to have one set of corners in that group. But you don't have all the corners in the group. You only have one. You also have an opposite lady in the group, or excuse me, a right-hand lady, I meant to say. But you don't have both right-hand ladies in the same group. So we think of it as a partner group because that's the only one where everybody's partner is in their group, or everybody's person. So that seems like a strong statement. It's easy to prove it mathematically. There's just no doubt about the truth that exactly one of these cases will happen. For those that are really technical, the way you split the square into two groups is such that every person's diagonal opposite dancer is in the other group. As long as you follow that rule, this will be true. And in general, when you follow that rule, you're going to get two side-by-side groups of four. So that's the way we talk about it. Consider an 8-chain through formation. If the dancers are in a corner group, if you know that somehow, and if you have any man in the square facing his corner, then every man in the square will be facing his corner. That's a really strong statement. You mean you can, if you know a little bit about the setup of the square, then you can look at one person and tell what everybody else is like in the square. Huh. Now the same rule is true for any kind of relationship group. If you're in a partner group, and if one man is looking at his partner or standing beside his partner, then every man is looking at his partner or standing beside his partner. If you're in a partner group and you're not looking at your partner's the other one in the group. It's only two choices. You're either with the partner or you're not when you know you're in a partner group. If you know that relationship information somehow, that's a lot of knowledge that you can go, or that a lot of knowledge that you can use. Now, as we talk about relationships, formation, arrangement, and sequence are very spatial. They're very geographical. They depend on where dancers are standing on the floor, what direction they're facing. It all depends, on where they are on a map. Relationships don't. Relationship groups depend on how you choose to define the group, and it's who's in the group, not the shape of the group. We don't care if a group of 4 is a wave, if it's facing couples, if it's back to back, if it's a box circulate. We don't care if it's a T-bone formation. It doesn't matter what the shape or arrangement of the group is. It doesn't matter what the sequence of dancers are. Only depends on who's in the group. So very not spatial, very ungeographic, as it were. All right, we've been talking about this stuff, dancing around the topic. How can we actually see what the relationships are? Let's look at some simple examples first to begin with. Think static square, sides, square through 4. Boop, boop, boop. We know everybody's facing their corner. Well, this is a classic definition of a corner group. Everybody's looking at their corner in each pair of facing couples in this 8-chain through formation. It's a corner group. On the other hand, if we had said from that static square, if we'd had the head square through 2 hands, we know every dancer's facing their right-hand lady. We've seen that perhaps many times. It's a right-hand lady group. Some people call it an across the street group as well for old archaic purposes. But it's a right-hand lady group. Or if people think of relationships with respect to a one of the lady dancers, one of the women, you might be thinking of a left-hand man type of group. It all works the same. Again, trivial examples have the static square have heads or sides lead right or left. Everybody's partner is beside them, partner groups. If you have the 4 ladies chain first and then do that lead right, lead left, everybody's opposite lady will be there. Those are trivial examples of the 4 different kinds of groups. But that's hard to see. You don't want to start saying, well, I'll look at a group of 4. Okay, Bob's in that group. Is Bob's partner Carol in the group? Why, yes, she is. Okay, Ted is in the group. Is Alice in the group somewhere? No, Alice is not in the group. Well, it can't be a partner group, so let's try corners. Do I see my corner? That's way too hard. Nobody does that. What we do instead, we take a look at the pattern matching. We use the pattern matching parts of our brain to look for matches. A match is an original couple somewhere in the same group. They might be current partners. They might not be partners. They might be next to each other. They might not be next to each other. As long as they're in the same group, the two original partners, we're going to call that a match. So if you look at a group of 4 and you see 2 matches, 2 sets of original partners in that group, it must be a partner group. You don't have to care or know about anything else. If you look at a group of 4 and you don't see any original match couples in that group, it has to be an opposite lady group. There's just, you look at the group, oh, I don't see any sets of partners anywhere in there. Done. It's an opposite lady group. We can take that information and use it. When you see just one matching couple in a group, the other isn't matched, then we have to ask sort of a second question. If any dancer's corner is anywhere in that group, then everybody's corner is in the group, and it's a corner group. So if you see one match and you see a corner anywhere in the group, then this must be a corner group. If you don't see a corner in there, it's a right-hand lady group. There aren't any other choices. One match, no corner, it's a right-hand lady group. It may take a moment to count up matches and to look for corners. It's not necessarily an instantaneous glance, although as you get good at doing this, it becomes very close to an instant glance, particularly for the one match or other type things. But remember that relationship groups don't change as you change formation, arrangement, or sequence. As long as you keep those 4 groups, those 4 dancers dancing together, You can move them all around within that group of four. You can move that group of four to different spots on the dance floor. You can do what you want while at the same time, you're kind of going, oh yeah, now I see one partner. Yeah, there's the other partner. Just as a trivial example, from an 8-chain through formation, swing through, centers run, wheel and deal. It's a 0, we know that, but it takes about 5 seconds to execute. That gives you 5 seconds to be looking for your match in your corner without having to think about what you're calling. You can say those things and know what it's going to do and be, and just be back seeing it. There's no hurry to be able to see these matches and corners if that's what you're looking for. So look for matches. 2 matches in a group means it's partner. 0 matches means it's opposite lady. 1 match with a corner is a corner group. Otherwise, it's a right-hand lady group. The way we've presented this suggests that you're able to recognize all 4 couples in the square as being original partners. Okay, many times you can't necessarily do that, particularly if folks are switching up on you. But what you can do is count the number of dancers that you recognize from any 2 adjacent couples. Another way of doing the same thing, if you look at a group of 4 and you don't see any of the 4 dancers you could recognize, then it has to be, they all have to be over in the other group. If you don't see anyone in one group, then all 4 have to be in the other group. Therefore, it's a partner group. If you're matching on 2 couples that were adjacent to each other that shared a corner. If you just see 1 or 3 of your recognized dancers, but not all 4, then there's got to be just 1 matched couple in the group. So then you take your second look. Is my known corner in this group or that group? If so, it's a corner station. If your known corners aren't together in either group, it's a right-hand lady station. If you see just 2 recognized dancers, well, then they're either original partner. You've got the other 2 dancers must be over in the other group. So it's a partner group. If you see 2 and they aren't original partners, it's an opposite lady group. So there's a few different ways you can do this. There's another technique for kind of looking wider, looking for your matches across the whole square. We could talk more about that if somebody wanted to, but there's several different techniques for counting the number of matching couples or matching dancers that give you the information you need to know about what relationships are there. So we know how to change formations. We know that we use calls to change formations. We know how to change arrangements. If we do a single hin centers trade, now we might be in a boy-boy-girl formation instead of a boy-girl-girl wave type thing. Yeah, we know how to do that. The only things that make relationships change is changing who is in a group of 4 dancers. It doesn't matter where that group is. It doesn't matter if the group moves around the floor. It doesn't matter the formation, the sequence, the arrangement. None of those things matter to the relationship. Only thing that matters is who's in the group. That means the only way that the relationship of a group changes is by changing the dancers. So how do you change dancers? 2 different ways. You can either choose to look at the square in a different way, picking a different group of 4 dancers to look at. Okay. Or you can use 1 or more calls to make a change. You can move dancers around. Every call or sequence of calls, however long that sequence might be, will either change 0, 1, or 2 members of a group. Changing 3 people, well, that's like moving the whole group over to the other spot, but leaving 1 dancer behind. That's like changing 1 dancer, taking 1 dancer out of a group, putting a different dancer in. Changing all 4 dancers in a group, yeah, that's just moving the group over somewhere else on the floor. We don't care. So really, every group you can think, every call or sequence of calls or every module or whatever, you can think of it as changing 0, 1, or 2 members in a group. If nobody's changed, if you haven't taken any dancers out and replaced them with other dancers, then the relationship status has to stay the same, right? If you were in a partner group before and all 4 people are still there, it's still a partner group. That's pretty apparent. Let's add a couple more bits of terminology here. Mike Hayworth came up with some interesting names here. It turns out that the partner and opposite lady groups are kind of related to one another. Yeah, that's another level of relationship here. Mike calls those the double or nothing groups. There's either 2 sets of partners in a group, so it's partner group, or there's no sets of partners, double or nothing, it's the opposite lady group. Mike also suggests calling the corner and right-hand lady groups the one and only groups. He says there's only one matching couple in either of these groups. There's only one, so it's the one and only corner and right-hand lady groups. You can think of them that way. If you replace any one dancer in a group with someone from the other group, you maybe send somebody out of this group and somebody else will come into it, then the flavor of that relationship group will change. If you started in a double or nothing group, they'll wind up in a one and only group. If you change one dancer, or if you start in a one and only group, either corner or right-hand lady, and you change one dancer, you will switch to a double or nothing group, either the partner or the opposite lady. Now we can talk a little bit later about more precisely exactly how you can tell which way it's going. But the rule is simple. If you're changing one dancer in a group through your sets of calls, then it's going to go either from double or nothing to one and only, or from one and only to double or nothing. Guaranteed, it's got to happen when you send one dancer to the other side. Let's talk about sending. So 0 dancers doesn't change anything. Moving one dancer flips the flavor of the group. If we move 2 dancers, let's add one more term in here, again from Mike Hayworth. If you're in a partner group, let's say that each dancer and their original partner, let's call them groupies. If you're in a corner group, let's call each dancer in that dancer's corner groupies. Right-hand lady group, each man and his right-hand lady, think of them as groupies, etc. Okay, so the term groupie refers to 2 dancers, within a particular relationship group. If you move 2 dancers out of a group and into the other group, replacing them with others, if there's any pair of groupies that finishes in the same group, that they start in a group together and they finish in a group together, right? Whether you move them from one side to the other, or maybe they stayed in the same group, as long as they stayed together, then the relationship group didn't change. When you move 2 dancers across, if it's a guy and his groupie, lady and her groupie, then the relationship status doesn't change. But if you split up any pair of groupies as you move 2 dancers across, then it will switch to the opposite type of the same flavor, from corner to right-hand lady, or from partner to opposite lady, or the other way around, opposite lady to partner, right-hand lady to corner. If you send 2 dancers across and you split up the groupies, it flips to the other one of the same flavor. But if you send 2 dancers across and the groupies stay together, nothing changes. So if you think about it, this is actually kind of obvious. Think of two-faced lines with normal right-hand two-faced lines, and think of couples circulate. Couples circulate will move two dancers from one of those two-faced lines into the other. If you were in a partner group, everybody had their partner, and you do a couples circulate, well, when you're done, everybody's got their partner. So you still are in a partner group. If you started off in a corner group and every guy had his corner when you did the couples circulate, well, every guy's going to have his corner when you're done as well. And so it's still a corner group. But let's go back to that partner two-faced line. Everybody with their partner. And then ladies trade. You're not with your partner. When you do that couples circulate, well, each man, the men that are moving across are leaving their partner behind in the other group. The ladies that are moving across are leaving their partner behind in the other group. When these two people who are not groupies in a partner group, when they go to the other part of the square, they split up with their groupies, and we had to switch to an opposite lady station, an opposite lady group. If you try it just a little bit with checkers, it becomes really obvious. It sounds a whole lot more complicated to explain than it really is. It's actually very straightforward, and it's guaranteed it has to work that way. So yeah, this is if you switch that relationship group by sending two dancers across that weren't groupies, then there's basically like a four ladies chain effect that happens. You flip the relationship group from either partner to opposite lady or corner to right hand lady, almost as if you had done a four ladies chain within that formation somehow, if there was a way to do that. So an easier way to see this is to tell whether you've got somebody with a groupie or with their groupie or not, or how this flips things. If you're in a one and only group, either corner group or right-hand lady, everybody's corner is in the group with them, everybody's right-hand lady is in the group with them, there will be one matching couple. That matching couple will never be groupies in a one and only setup. They won't ever be each other's corner or each other's right-hand lady, left-hand man, right? Because they're original partners. So if you're in a one and only group and send any two dancers across, as long as you keep that matched couple together, then the relationship group will switch. Doesn't matter if they stay or if they go, as long as those original partners stayed together, the nature of the relationships will change. On the other hand, if you split up that matched couple, if you send either one of them out of the square with somebody else, then the relationship group will change. If you send the one like the matched guy with the other lady across the way, the relationship group will stay the same because they have to be groupies. So you can tell just by either splitting up or keeping this matched couple together, you can control whether you flip this relationship station before or not. Now we've seen these effects before. We teach them to brand new callers in basic caller schools. Think of the chicken plucker, the basic traffic pattern. What that sequence does, it puts the dancers into a corner group with a square through four. Right and left through doesn't change the membership of each group of four on each side. So you're still in a corner group. The pass through, now they're back to back within that group, but you still haven't changed who's in that group of four. Aha, that trade by takes two dancers out of one group, puts them into the other group. We know that they weren't groupies because we left our matched couple back behind. So we know that flips us into a right-hand lady relationship. And when we get to the other side there, we could count and check and look for we could count and see there's one matched couple, the original partners there. and the others are not, our corners are not present. We left them behind in the other group. So we've switched to a right-hand lady relationship. Again, continuing at that chicken plucker, we do a right and left through, still right-hand lady. Pass through, still right-hand lady. Aha, another trade by. We've taken two people, we've left our matched couple together, so that flips us back onto the corner station. We see this happening in the chicken plucker as we do it, as we teach it. We intentionally change the dancers from a corner group to a right-hand lady group and then send them back to the corner group, and we know we can resolve from there. Now, the chicken plucker itself, we often teach it with a right and left through, with a pass through, and a trade by to accomplish the change. But we know from relationships, from our conversation here, that any technique that keeps the two matched couples, the two matched dancers together while sending two dancers across to the other group, that will switch us. It doesn't have to be the trade by. Any call or sequence of calls that moves two dancers across from one side to the other while keeping the matched couple together when you're done, that will accomplish the same switch from corner to right-hand lady. We could do it with a Ferris wheel. We could do it with a spin chain through and the ladies circulate one place. We could do it with couples circulate. We could make lines of 4, bend the line in such a way that now our lines include different people. All of those techniques that switch the groups, that send two dancers while keeping a matched pair of dancers together, will, however many calls it takes, doesn't have to be one call, will switch from corner group to right-hand lady and back. We can send the matched couple across the way. We can skip a right left through, send the matched couple back across the way with our trade by or any other technique. It still switches the relationship group back to corners. You might have to fiddle a little bit to get them in sequence and facing their corners for an L-man left, but you know that you know what you're doing, getting everybody back to with their corners. So we could, when you have a chance, think of other calls or sequences of calls that take two dancers out of one group and send them to the other group, even if that group moves around the floor. Many, many different ways you can do this. Take a look at another tool here at the Invert and Rotate. We typically teach it in caller schools starting in a corner group, and we do something like a star through or a slide through, pass through, bend the line, slide through, and we say, hooray, it's a 0. And we've switched who the paired dancers are. Hooray, how about that? Well, let's look at this from relationship. Starting with everybody facing their corner in that typical ready to L-man left setup. The first star through or slide through just pairs each man with his corner, with his groupie. The pass through, now they're back to back, doesn't change anything in the group. They're still in a corner group and they still have their groupie by the hand. Now comes the bend the line. That bend the line takes our two dancers, our two groupies working as partners, that makes them face two other dancers, and we can think of them now as being in a different group of 4 with two other dancers. Because we kept our groupies together, when we switched the two dancers in the group, we're still in a corner group, even though we have two new dancers. And now that last slide through or star through just makes it pretty again to restore the original formation, arrangement, and sequence. So in this case, our bend the line changed two dancers in our group of 4, but because it was a guy with his groupie, a lady with her groupie, it kept the relationship station the same. So what if, I should say, that same invert and rotate, of course, will work in any relationship group as long as it starts by somebody facing their groupie. If you, if you're in a partner group, if everybody's a chain through formation, everybody's changing their partner, then the invert and rotate will keep you in a partner group and everybody will finish facing their partner. Same thing with right-hand ladies, same thing with opposite ladies. It doesn't work just for corners, it works in any group. In fact, it's a tenet of relationships. The things that work in one relationship group will do the same thing in every relationship group. So you can use these tools that maybe you've thought of as being only for corners. You can use them anywhere you're set up and know what they're going to do. So what happens if we do an invert and rotate when you're not facing your groupie? Okay, so we slide through. We've got somebody who isn't our groupie by the hand, pass through, doesn't change anything, bend the line. We've switched 2 dancers in our group of 4, but we split up our groupies. That means that we had to flip the relationship station to the other state, station's an old word, trying to get away from using that. Flips the relationship to a different group. If you started in corners, just not facing your corner, now you'll be in right-hand ladies. If you started in opposite lady, you'll be in a partner group. Everybody's partner will be there. So you can use the invert and rotate to intentionally change the relationship group. If, for example, you found yourself in an opposite lady group, there are no matches anywhere. If you can tell that you're not facing your opposite lady, yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. If you can tell that you're not facing her, then the invert and rotate will guarantee to take you to a partner group. In fact, it will guarantee that everybody will have their partner by the hand when they're done. You can use this to quickly get out of wherever you're at, take you intentionally to a different relationship group for whatever purpose you wish. Maybe you'd like to resolve from there. So we can use invert and rotate to flip back and forth between right-hand lady and corner, or to flip between opposite lady and partner, just by changing partners in the middle of that sequence. As just one example of changing partners, slide through reverse flutter wheel. Now you've changed partners, move on. You've no longer got your groupie by the hand, move on. We can take advantage of that. The notion of keeping the relationship station the same by keeping a guy and his groupie together, even as we change dancers. We can do this right away. It's very easy. In fact, this was one of the things Jerry Story used to teach a lot for new callers, and it really opened some people's mind. Begin by putting the dancers into some known relationship setup. Jerry liked to use right-hand lady group. Okay, so he would put the dancers into a right-hand lady group. He would make a mental note of any man and his right-hand lady. If we had just started by head square through 2 from a static square, he'd just remember any guy and the lady he's facing. Doesn't matter who they are, any guy and the lady she's facing. Remember those 2 dancers. Dance around in that group of 4 for a bit, as long as you want. Even moving that group around the square, as long as you kind of rubber band, keep those dancers together. If you separate them, put them back. When you decide that that group is ready for a change, pair up those remembered dancers. Put those 2 back together as partners. Then do something that moves 2 dancers to the other group of 4. You can pass through, bend the line, like we did in the invert and rotate. You can Ferris wheel. You can do whatever call you want. Couples circulate. Any sequence of calls that takes that guy and his remembered lady and puts them into the other group, or leaves them behind, bringing 2 dancers in. The relationship station will be the same. You're still in a right-hand lady group, even though you're dancing with different dancers, even if you're dancing on a different spot on the floor. Do that again. dance those people around, keep that group of four, put it back together if you need to. When you're ready to switch again, pair up that remembered man and that remembered lady. Move any two dancers across to the other group, as long as those two people go. Vernon Jones uses the phrase, take her with you. He talks about your remembered man with his remembered lady, send them across to the other side, take her with him. And you're still in a right-hand lady group. When you're done, all you have to do is unpair those people. At that point in that right-hand lady group, one of the couples must be original partners dancing together, right? It has to be, because it's not you're in a right-hand lady group. We know that there's one pair of original partners, and we know that the remembered guy and the remembered lady are not original partners. So the original partners have to be the other ones. Has to be. So at this point, you've got in one half of the square or the other, you've got a couple you can recognize. You put that couple in the middle of an 8-chain through formation, pass through, trade by, Alaman left, guaranteed. There is no sight calling. The only thing you've done is you take your remembered guy and remembered lady, split them up, find the original matching pair. They're somewhere in the square that you can recognize. Put them on the inside of an 8-chain through, because you know that's going to keep them together when you pass through, trade by. And you know that in that corner group, if the paired up couple is on the outside, you have to be in sequence. There is no doubt. There is absolutely no doubt that you've hit corners. So you can put dancers into a known relationship station, dance them all over the place, switch the people they're dancing with when you choose to do that. And at the end, you know exactly what you have to do to resolve. Now, if you talk to some of the national callers, as they're going from unknown group to unknown group to unknown group, many of them use this very technique. Maybe they don't put a name to it, but if you ask somebody like a Tony Oxendine, he'll tell you this is what he does. He's very good at disguising the changes. He's very good at knowing how to split people up and put dancers back together. But he knows that when he does that, he knows exactly when he changes who's in a group of four, and he knows exactly how to put them back together to that right-hand lady setup or whatever known relationship he had. And then he knows exactly what to do to resolve. This isn't just for beginning callers. This is something that everybody can use. It is absolutely amazing when you really start getting into it. You can dance people all over the floor and know absolutely where you're at, what to do, and how to get out of it. All right, we put the dancers into a right-hand lady group. We move people around, controlling it. We were ready to resolve. We did what we needed to do. Alaman left. I mentioned sequence. I mentioned matching couple on the outside of an 8-chain through formation. Sequence doesn't usually matter in relationships until you're getting ready to resolve. A couple of easy ways to see the sequence, without necessarily counting, looking at the dancers to see their circular order. If you're in a corner group, the dancers will be in sequence when the paired couple's on the outside of an 8-chain through formation. In a right-hand lady group, the dancers will be in sequence when the paired couple's on the inside. Conversely, from those two cases, you can tell when you're out of sequence. In a partner line, all the dancers facing lines of fours, if everybody's with their partners, dancers are in sequence when your known corners are adjacent, if you were to circle left. In an opposite lady group, The rules are sort of upside down from a partner group. In a partner group, you know each man has his partner when she's as close as possible, when she's right there in hand. In an opposite lady group, each man will have his opposite lady in hand when his partner is as far away as possible, preferably diagonally opposite in the square. Or if they're, if you're in a 8-chain through formation, you might have a guy at one end on the outside over here, and his partner will be on the outside at the far end of the 8-chain through formation. Okay, when the partner's as far away as possible, you'll have opposite lady in hand. In partner lines, dancers are in sequence when the corners are adjacent. In opposite lady lines, the rule's upside down. Dancers are in sequence when the corners are not adjacent to each other. So when you're looking to pair up, working with opposite lady lines, look for matches on the diagonal. That's when you know you've got opposite ladies. If you see a partner, if you see matches where the guy is in one group, the lady's in a facing line, and she's in the other group, the other part of the line, you've got opposite lady lines, but they're not with they're opposite ladies at the time. So there's a lot more we can do. To control exactly what you're doing. Gosh, I'm running a few minutes behind schedule here. To go from one and only group, if you want to go to partners, you send either of the unmatched dancers over to the other group, guaranteed to switch you to a partner group. So if you're in corner or right-hand lady, keep your matched dancers together, send either of the others over to the other group, guaranteed everybody's partner will be in the group when you're done. Same sort of logic. If you don't find any matches anywhere, if you're in an opposite lady group, you don't see any matches, send one dancer across the way. You're guaranteed to get a match. You'll be in a one and only group. One of the couples will be matched up. But if you want to go from a one and only group, corner right-hand lady to opposite lady, just split up your matched pair. Send either one of those two dancers across to the other group, guaranteed to put you into an opposite lady group. If you're in partner group and want to go to corners, well, either your corners are together, in which case you keep them together while sending one dancer across. If your corners are not together, then send one dancer to the other group over where their corner is. Bring two corners together by moving one dancer, guaranteed to go from either opposite lady or partner into a corner group. No matter what setup you are, if you want to get to a corner group, it's easy to tell who you have to send across the way. Technical zeros, I'm just going to say a technical zero is simply a call or sequence of calls that moves two dancers from one group to the other while preserving formation, arrangement, and sequence. That is a technical zero, or all calls that do that are technical zeros. You can use that. That means that if the two dancers that are being switched across are groupies at the time, then the technical zero acts as a zero. It preserves relationship as well as formation, arrangement, sequence. But if they aren't, if the two dancers that go across the way aren't groupies, then it's not a zero. It exhibits the four ladies chain effect. It switches the relationship group to that opposite of the same flavor, from partner to opposite lady, from corner to right-hand lady, or back the other directions. So you can use those technical zeros to your advantage, either intentionally using them as a zero or intentionally using them not as a zero when you want to change the relationship group. Cool. Technical zeros aren't just a choreographic oddity. They're a useful choreographic tool, especially if you're doing kind of you've got some sort of module or theme using a sequence within a group of four, and you want to switch dancers around and use the sequence again. by making sure you use the right two dancers with that technical zero, you can keep the group the same and play with your relationship. But then when you want to turn it into a get out, you just switch you just trade the ladies, for example, before you start the call, and wham, you switch your relationship group, and suddenly your theme behaves very differently. And the dancers did not have a single clue as to what happened right there. It's absolutely magic. If you use the concept of primary and secondary couples when you're setting things up, you're missing out on half of the starting positions. Instead, if you think of relationships, I want to start this get out as an opposite lady out of sequence, instead of put my primary guy here and my secondary lady there and so on. It's much better. I'm going to say that, in my opinion, some of the best surprise get outs incorporate a change in relationships as part of the get out. Moving the dancers around helps disguise what you're doing. I won't take the time, I'm running late here, but the plus call spin chain the gears, using relationships, I was able to come up with a get out using spin chain the gears in, without pushing checkers, just by understanding the change in relationship. I wanted to change the relationship from right-hand lady to corner. So I started in right-hand lady, made sure that the guys did not have their groupie, used the call that switched to corner station. If you think about it, or if I send out the slides later, you can read the slides. It was a really simple way to set up that get out with spin chain the gears, boys cross fold, a man left. Skipping past this a little bit, Deborah Carroll Jones for a get out wanted square through two, trade by to a right and left grand. And she was able to use relationships to realize it ends in a partner group. The trade by caused the group to change. Therefore, it had to start. It had to start in an opposite lady setup. Square through two changes sequence. So she knew she had to start out of sequence in order to finish in sequence. So just by knowing these couple of things, that get out, she could say, opposite lady out of sequence. That's my setup. If you do opposite lady in sequence, you put a right left through at the front of it. Very, very easy to see once you get used to using this. So summarizing, relationships aren't hard to see. You can do the pattern matching that our brains can do to find matching partners. You can deliberately choose to keep the relationship groups the same while changing dancers. You can deliberately choose to change the relationship groups when you want. Even the newest callers can use the keep them in a right-hand lady relationship technique and resolve with no doubt at all, pass through or pass through trade by man left when you set it up right. Even the most experienced callers often do use these techniques when they're calling to unfamiliar dancers. You don't have to hunt for corners. If you know the relationship station, it's easy to drive the dancers to corners just by sending one or two people across the square. And the rules are simple to tell you which ones to do. You can use them to help design your get outs. You can drive the square to set up your get outs. It's really easy to do once you get used to it. Color Lab Knowledge Base has some topics, some papers on this. I've got a book on it that's free. Just download the PDF. Kip Garvey has a 14-page paper that says the same thing using some different words. Sometimes people find Kip's words or diagrams easier to see than mine. Crams, many of you may have heard people talk about crams over the last 10 years. Crams is a calling system that uses this theory of relationships as a major tool. If you look through YouTube for Caller Lab Convention crams, you'll find several presentations over the years, including some absolute top-notch callers telling how they use it and use it well to effect. Fundamentally, crams is nothing more than using relationships to get the job done. together with tiny amounts of site calling and the notion of theming sequences within a tip, kind of micro programming within the tip. So that's the deluge in 51 minutes or 61 minutes. Very open to questions or comments or thoughts that anyone would have.
Let me start by the fact that we are at approximately an hour, so we'll do the usual routine of thanking Dan for technically hosting our setup and recording and posting eventually. Thanking you guys for coming and staying and paying attention. And especially let's have a hand for Barry for a great presentation. And as usual, if you've only got an hour designated to this thing, you may leave without feeling guilty about it. But we normally actually do shorter presentations and leave half the time open for discussion. Was no way I was going to interrupt Barry in the middle of this because it was great and it just built and getting to a thing. But I hope you will, or many of you will stick around for discussion, presentations, discussions, questions, etc. And I'm going to start with just a couple of thoughts. At the beginning, Barry mentioned that there's going to be a lot of new stuff here and you probably won't be able to grasp it all, but it'll give you an overview to see if you want to go through it and learn more about it. And I think you're going to make your presentation available, Barry. That some
Yes.
people have requested it and had a lot of information in there to review. I know for me, there were a lot of new terms. It was an interesting, new, slightly different way of looking at things for me, and there were a lot of new terms, and I couldn't say I could use it. I couldn't say I could use it right now, but I have a great feeling for where it's coming from.
Jeff Garbutt, did I manage to keep you awake all the time? Thank you so much. It's really late over there.
I have several other comments, but those are for later. But the one thing I wanted to point out when Barry was saying, look for a partner relationship here or a corner relationship there. The cool thing about it is it didn't have to be in the same square. You could bounce from square to square, and if you remembered people there, pick on one that, one couple in this square and another couple in that square, if those are people that you know and or address similarly, etc. Anyway, fire away. Any other opening questions, thoughts? Barry, you sold them all.
I got a question. I think watching Barry's presentation and along with Kip Garvey's from a couple of weeks ago, I think between the two of them, they fill some of the holes that each one didn't cover. So I think those two go together real nice, the Barry and the Kip Garvey one.
John, was this Kip's on the
transitions conversions
on Mel's Ash presentation?
Yeah, I think it might have been. It was on when he did this transitions and conversions.
Okay.
I think this parallels that, and it fills the holes that the other one doesn't have.
I'll have to go take a look at that one too. Sounds good. Anyone else?
Just following up on Don's comment about multiple squares, I've used exactly that point to advantage quite a bit. If I have a square where I see, oh, these people broke down, but I know these dancers are probably right, and then I can pair them up with a dancer over there, and or even find, oh, that square, I never even looked at that square, but they're dressed alike. I can guess that they're partners. It yields a huge amount of information, even across squares, to piece it together. It's actually a really handy technique.
Clark, what were you going to say?
So let's say we have heads lead right. So in our group of 4, everyone's got partners. If I split the square vertically, what I can't immediately say what I've got. You can though. What do we have?
You've got opposite lady.
You've got opposite lady. So right off the bat, so all this was new to me, but right off the bat, that I twigged and stumbled on that because it's like, it depends on how you split the square. Now, if I said heads lead right, veer left, then in my group of 4 in my line, we've got partners. And in my group of 4, not in my line, we've got partners.
Yes.
So there, it's partners everywhere, which is great. But the heads lead right without that, without the veer left, one way to split the square is one thing, one way to split the square is the other. Now, I know we normally don't split the square down the column. And you did mention later in your talk that one way to change the relationship is to change the split. So maybe none of that matters, but that was a stumbling point for me.
It's actually a very useful tool right there as you're calling along. The crux of it is when you choose to split the square, either of 2 different ways, and there are actually more ways to split it than that. But when you choose to split the square either of 2 ways, if both ways include, I'll say, a guy and his groupie, then the relationship station is the same either way. However, if the split separates a guy and his groupie, then the relationship station group flips to that opposite of the same flavor. Partner to opposite lady, corner to right-hand lady, etc. And so you can, if you're looking at 4 dancers and you see that you want to think of the square in that other group, divide it the other way that splits up any pair of groupies, any one pair of groupies, and now focus on that new group of dancers. They're in the other station. Do what you want with them.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Good. The other comment I had was you said sending, one dancer across or whatever. You didn't give examples there. Obviously, the one that comes first to mind is spin chain through, which was such an earth-shaking call when it first came out. Because almost every other call we do sends 2 dancers across. Oh my gosh, what do we do when we send 1 dancer across? How do we resolve this, etc.? And obviously you or people who understand what you talked about know all of that power.
Very centers trait. Tidal waves, center 4, swing through. Those are examples of moving 1 dancer across. Walk and dodge. All kinds of things can be used to send 1 dancer across, or you can send multiple dancers across and bring some of them back. As long as the net effect is that there's 1 dancer changing in the membership of the group, accomplishes the goal.
And when you say walk and dodge, that would be in the center 4 walk and dodge. Right. Or even from a squared set, head ladies chain is sending 1 dancer across.
Yes.
Isn't if you're having them split in the squared set, heads lead right, and there's a vertical line down the middle, which is the way the usual way I think that people think of you split the square. Isn't step to a wave? Isn't AC doocy sending 1 across?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I think of as the quintessential send 1 person across.
Any 4 dancers circulate will do that.
The thing with the lead right and veer left is that the first time you don't have your buddies, but the veer left will give you your buddies, correct? Or groupies, sorry, that's what the term was.
Yes. Daryl, don't be so polite. Just speak up.
Yes. I'm going to be. Can we do any of this with terminations? This lead right, split them the other way and stuff?
Oh, sure. This is all in how the caller perceives the square. It's the way you look at it, not anything to do with the way that the dancers are on the floor or on the screen for terminations. So absolutely, when you use terminations, start thinking about finding the pairs, finding the
No,
group.
no, I mean, can we share the screen and actually use Terminations to
Oh,
illustrate what you're talking about for us visual learners?
I'm sorry, I can't at the moment. I'm running on a Mac, and Terminations. I guess I could do the web version, but I'd encourage you, just go ahead and try it out. Take a look, and it's there. Or after we finish the questions, I'm happy to stay on and spend more time with it. But let's get
Barry-
through the questions before we do that.
Barry, if
Barry,
you
okay.
go, I was just going to say,
Mike,
if you go to Terminations on your Mac, it doesn't work very well on Safari, but on Chrome it works pretty well. Go
All right,
ahead, John.
Barry, when you go, if you're in a corner group and you exchange one person, you can either go to an opposite lady group or a partner group.
Uh-huh.
Can you give me an example of the transition or the conversion from a corner group to a partner group, and then one from a corner group to an opposite lady group? I guess I've been reading about that, but I can't quite figure out which. There's two ways to go, and I haven't nailed down the differences between the two ways. So
Okay, so let's do this. Heads square through 4. Everybody's
Yeah, you're
facing
in
a
a corner
corner,
group.
right? Corner group. Right and left through, veer left. Just for flow. So we know that you've got the paired up couple is still together as a couple. When you, let's see, you wanted to go from corner to partner. Yeah. So right left through, veer left. Yeah, that just veer left without the right and left through. Makes it a little easier. Because then we have the head man on the end of a line as facing in. Let's see. I did want the right and left through. Sorry, go back. Yep, and veer left. Now you notice that unpaired dancer is there. If we do a boys circulate here, you'll see that we're keeping our paired couple, the 4s, together in the same group of 4. Magic happened. We sent one of our unpaired dancers to the other group of 4, and that guaranteed put us into partners. No doubt about it. Now, if you'd wanted to go to opposite lady for some reason, you would have sent one of the paired dancers out. Undo this, if you would. Let's see. Sure, and
go back to a corner group. One more time back. And now you're in a corner group. Now go to an opposite lady.
Okay, so veer left. Now we want to split up our partners. We know that to get to opposite lady, we don't want any partners to be together. So if we send one of our matched dancers, either one of the number 4s out of the group, let's see what happens.
Oh, okay.
So you either keep your partners together if you want to drive to a partner group, or you split up your partners if you want to drive to an opposite lady setup.
And add bend the line, and you really can switch between your partners and opposites how you like it.
Very much so, yes. So what he's referring to here is, if you look at the box of at each box of 4, 2 facing couples, they are opposites. So that's an opposite lady group facing each other. But if you look at the lines of 4, each line of 4 is a partner setup. So depending on what you wanted to do, you might dance the dancers in the box to stay an opposite lady, or you might dance the lines to stay in partner lines. You know, if you did, for example, a pass through wheel and deal, now you've clearly got back to a partner formation from that opposite lady setup that we had. And the change wasn't that we moved dancers around. We just chose to look at the line of 4 that were partners instead of looking at the boxes of 4 that were opposite lady.
Oh, I get it.
Oh, you're catching on to this very well. So now we're back to where we can choose which way we'd like to view the dancers. We can choose to look at them as opposites or as partners, depending on how we choose to split them up. Mel is having fun with this.
Oh, Mel is the master at sharing.
Are you starting to see the value here of being able to tell relationships and manipulate them?
Yeah,
so.
It'll get there someday.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit, I won't say revolutionary, but once you start looking at the square with the perspective of relationships, new vistas open up. My wife laughs at me because as we're dancing to somebody else, I'll mutter to myself what relationship group we're in. Opposite lady, you know, right hand lady. And she'll tell me to be quiet. She doesn't want to know. She doesn't want to lose the magic. But when you get into some of this, if you start seeing it as you dance, all of a sudden you see how somebody can quickly resolve from wherever you're at. Oh, I know I'm in right hand lady. Okay, send 2 dancers across. We'll be in corner. Oh, look, that's what he did. We're in corner. Here it is. It's interesting to be able to see those things coming because of recognizing the relationships as you're dancing on the floor.
I think I can't keep my mouth shut any longer when I add some things. Sight calling to me is a 3-part thing: memorizing who started with whom, dancing, and resolving. A lot of people think of it as just the resolving, and a lot of people should focus more on the middle thing of dancing. But the hard part for me is memorizing who started with whom. And one of the things that your relationship requires, it helps if you can can memorize who started with whom. And then you can just look around and see, oh, these 2 could have been paired and these 2 aren't, which is a difficult part for me. But if you can do that, and if you get to the stage of doing that, this is good. Can I summarize a little more, Barry? You also, and assuming you can do that, on the resolve part, if you can quickly see where the relationships are of these different groupings that are possible, then it's pretty cool that you can work around to a nice resolve pretty easily. The other thing is that if you don't want to memorize who started with whom, you can obviously do some setups like head, lead, right, and you automatically know that you're in a partner group. And then having a bunch of memorized modules to get you to a corner group or whatever, you can use that approach without having to memorize specific people. But again, it's memorizing a lot of modules. I guess part of it is because aside from just random site calling that I do and then snapshot resolving due to the simplicity of years and years and years of calling, my mental image system, I don't want to be pushing that here, but you just follow one person and the formation.
Sure. The trade-off is that with mental image, we have to remember the rules for which are the X's and the O's, and we have to accurately track the state of whether we've crossed all the X's or not, as well as knowing how the element spot moves around. Now, those are straightforward rules, and by knowing those rules and following them and tracking things, we get the same result. That's part of why I think there is a great similarity in terms of the two systems. They're not identical by any means, but I think there's got to be an intimate relationship between them. I haven't figured out what that relationship is, but you talk about needing to memorize dancers. That's where the Tony Oxendine technique of putting dancers into a known relationship station and consciously keeping them, or knowing when he changes and knowing how to put it back. Even though he can do an awful lot around the edges with that's not memorized, he does have to remember like two dancers, but just by remembering those two dancers, he can pick up a lot. So
the magic is that whether you memorize, read modules, or what have you, it works. The dancers don't know one from the other unless you just repeat right and left through as a zero you use too often. They all are just different ways to explain the magic that's happening out there, the kaleidoscope and doing and then undoing to resolve it. And it's great to see these different approaches to explaining what's going on there and to be able to use to work with it. And one last plug for mental image, as far as having to remember X's, which calls are the X's, which ones, for those that aren't involved, knowing which ones exchange partners per the rules of the system. It's something you have to learn, but once you've learned it, it's there. You don't have to memorize a new set of people every dance or every tip you call. That works fine.
That's why it was so revolutionary when you came out with it. Absolutely. Dan would describe this information we have to remember as being bits of entropy. I remember you trying to classify how many bits of entropy there were in the setup of a square some years ago. And that's exactly true. There's some amount of information we have to understand and follow and keep. Exactly what that information is can change. There's different approaches to it, but we have to know something in order to keep it going.
Hey, just to chime in on the mental image thing, the thing about having to remember which are the X calls and which are the O calls is a lot easier than it sounds, because mostly they're all O calls. So really what you're remembering is particular calls are an exception to the rule and require you to do something, whereas the O calls sort of require you not to do anything in some sense. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Keith, you look like you almost wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that the bits of entropy work just fine until the dancers add their own with cycling.
But I've used a lot of this grouping thinking when I call, but I realized that I actually don't need to.
I yield to the floor.
I've used a lot of this group thinking when I call, but I noticed that I don't even have to keep track on the grouping. I just have to keep track on which type of group there is. You call it a double or nothing. I call it a pool group. So they're either in the pool or in the crossbar. So my dancers are always in the bar and in the pool. And then I only need to remember 3 dancers. I don't need that 4th guy. I just need my key dancers, corner, and the partners. And then I know it all.
Yes.
And keeping track of whether they're in the pool or in the bar, that's quite easy. As you said, there are very few. I mean, at basic, there's column circulate. I think only 8 people call that moves 1 dancer. Right. Unless I do something in the center or end circulate or something else. At mainstream, there's a spin chain through, we said, plus we have AC-DC, grand swing through anymore. Spin chain and exchange the gears. Those calls are the only ones I have to avoid to know that if I do something else, yeah, then I'm in my same group.
Yes. Yes.
I
Absolutely.
plan to refer to all the dancers now as my little bits of entropy.
Howard, Barry referred to you quite a bit. I gather that you are comfortable using this kind of stuff. How much, what can you add to what Barry said, or tell us, back up what he said? I'm picking on you and you're choosing to remain muted, which works fine. There we go.
Can't hear Howard.
You're unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
This help?
That helped.
Yeah.
There's Howard.
I
Nice
would
to see you, Howard.
Hi, Barry. I've used somewhat the mental image ever since I first started calling due to some help that I had. And I've varied some things. I have trouble remembering corners. And I have a tendency to somewhat freewheel occasionally. So mental image has been pretty good for me. But the relationships of the Vassar, I've also tried to incorporate a little bit of that as I go. But other than that, I still strongly do mental image. With the years off, I have no idea what's going to happen, though. I have to call fairly regular to keep the mental image sharp. And I'm not sure where that's going right now. How you doing, Barry?
Doing good. Doing good. Howard and I live perhaps 100 miles apart, 120, something like that.
Yep. I'm in the middle of the state and you're up in the northern part.
Yep. Hi, Sandy. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing well. It's nice to see you again. Been way too long.
Yes, it has. Thanks.
If I could, I'd like to go back to something we started out with, and that was the masks and dancing. We are slowly beginning to open up, not as much as the clubs and the regular places where they dance, but we have a couple of people locally that are opening up their garages and their living rooms for 2 squares mostly is about the most we can handle. But the other side of that is our dance size before the pandemic was 2 squares. So basically we've got regular dancing going on. When this first started, about 2 months ago, I guess it was, there was quite a bit of mask wearing and run to the hand sanitizer afterwards. This last dance that I went to last Tuesday, there were no masks. I saw several in pockets, but no one put them on at any time during the dance. And there was a lot more handshaking and little hugs. And I think that's just a general way things are going. And that's just in the area here in middle of Illinois.
Yeah, I think in this area, we're starting to see little bits of basement dancing as well. And most of the groups in this area are saying September. We'll be back in September. Mostly it's been driven off of availability of facilities. Facilities are telling us they're not open for us yet, but they're saying September we should be.
We've been told here in our area that most of the places will not open up probably this year at all.
How do you site call when everybody's wearing a mask? Please, nobody answer.
I think it'd be a good
You
exercise
know-
if we could. Okay, I'll go.
I
Let me
was-
go, then you can go.
Okay.
I think it'd be a good exercise if we could come up with some way to have 8 people as a square and some sort of exercise. I know to keep track of who's who in the zoo. Obviously, you can't put numbers on their backs like like you're doing when you're playing around. But it'd be nice if we could have some sort of an exercise that we could run the people through and some sort of a way to teach us how to recognize who's who. I don't know if it's even possible. It's in my mind, but it'd be kind of neat if we could do that to help us
Yeah.
try to pick up who's dancing with who and what position they occupy.
John, all you have to do is get them to wear matching masks. Instead of matching outfits, matching masks. Done.
We're trying to work away from that. I don't think that's going to be as big a factor as it sounds right now.
So the one thing you can do as without a square in front of you to learn to see this more often is to watch videos of other callers calling, or obviously if you can watch them in real life, but assuming that's not an option right now, and look for the pairings, look for the processes as the dancers go along. If you do that for a while, I found that I started to be able to see it more, and then I'd lose it, and that would be a good reminder to get back and see it. But the watching videos of other people calling can be very, very useful for this.
And if you're a new caller and you say to your dancers, wear matching T-shirts or something like that, they'd probably do it for you.
John, ask me next Wednesday, and I'll squeeze in a tip or two that might help with that.
You could come up with a set of vests and with numbers on them, and have one square wear the numbers, and then you got your checkers on the floor for you.
The Square Dance Club that I learned to dance with still in their closet has a bunch of soccer jerseys that I bought for them. Just pullover vest pinafores. Yeah, totally reasonable. Dancers love to help.
Yeah, we have the same thing here, but in a real dance, you got to figure out how to do it without numbers or aids. So
only thing that works for that is practice.
Something like that. I don't know, practice. It's that 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, and 10 thing. Yeah. Okay.
So as I say, ask me Wednesday. I've got a couple of tricks. Mel, you've got your hand up, and then Howard.
Just to note, this is actually brought up with one of the newer callers that was working with Taminations and also with Colorama, but it works a lot easier on Taminations. Using the techniques that Barry was talking about, identifying your corner box relationships, or if you're going to set it up in partner lines and you're using opposites or using corner groupings on one side, etc. What they would do is when they're writing their choreography, or just freewheeling, if you will, when they see a formation, they just put in brackets what that formation is at the end of that formation. And then when they review the sequence or copy it out, it pairs out. And it's just one of those verbal triggers to help them say, oh yeah, I am being aware. I want to have a quick look at that again. And it reinforces that in the mind. It's just something that it was actually a couple of the newer callers pointed out that they started doing this based on what Kip was saying. And also it will work absolutely marvelous with what you were saying, Barry, to identify where those changes are and what makes those changes, because you reinforce that in your mind as you go.
Mel, that's also good for a quick get out if half or 3/4 of the floor.
Absolutely. And I wasn't going to go into that aspect because that's a whole different session, but absolutely correct. That's where they identified. So, oh, well, I've got this and I've got a module that gets me out from a partner line or a corner box or this.
So Howard, then somebody else, and then Mikhail. I can't remember what somebody else was.
My comment was on the vests and the numbering. At a dance that's not even possible. At workshops, I think it would be very helpful, and I think the dancers that would be at a workshop would be more than willing to help you with that. But at a dance, I think you got a problem.
Somebody else had a hand. Oh, I can't remember who. Mikhail, why don't you go?
I was thinking in hexagons. How can you think about relations in hexagons?
I was going to say, my head would hurt. Others would be better suited to answer that question.
I only have a few things to say on the hexagon thing. One is Barry started out by saying that with Fazer, in the sequence part, there's two sequences. You can look at the boys and they're either in sequence or out of sequence, and you can look at the girls and they're in sequence or out of sequence. Hexagons have, like, I forget, it's either 4 or 6 sequences. When you look at the boys, you know, man number 1, 2, 3, if they're in order 1, 2, 3, that's good, they're in sequence. If they're 3, 2, 1, then they're out of sequence, but they can be jumbled other ways. And at that point, I just kind of throw up my hands. I will say that when you look at a hexagon, it's usually just like in squares, when you say, where's my group that I'm looking at? Where's the dividing line? Usually it's a group of 2 by 2. They're doing right and left throughs and flutter wheels, or it's a 1 by 4. They're in that ocean wave doing swing through, boys run, wheel and deals. When I dance hexagons, I notice the caller very often keeps us in that group of 4, or then moves that group of 4. So when I introduce a new person to hexagon dancing, a lot of what they dance is just 2 couple dancing. There just happens to be 3 of them doing it rather than 2. And it's rare that we hit the biggie calls like the coordinates, the column circulates, a Ferris wheel or something like that, double pass through track 2. Those just don't get called quite as often, but yet those are the more interesting, harder to dance hexagon calls. So I think a lot of callers, based on their calling and resolving mechanism, keep us in simpler to dance hexagon formations.
Thank you, Mikhail, for making people think. You always do that well. Were there any other hands up? Did I see something coming? You mentioned, Barry, keeping groups together, or what have you, the elastic band and that kind of stuff. I've actually got a couple of sections in the book Out of Sight that refer to that, but I never used it. I just wrote it there because I'd heard about it, and I can't even recall what I called it. I didn't talk about a rubber band, but it's a good concept that even without memorizing who started with whom, it should be pretty possible just to keep 4 dance, assuming that the square that you're watching either in your head or on the floor is not making mistakes. But it should be pretty easy, even without identifying who's with whom. You look at a group of 4, and no matter where they go, you can keep track of keeping them, picturing a rubber band around them. Good graduation party trick. And yeah, if you can learn how to maneuver people and get them back together, then you can come back to a situation where you were in.
So Barry, when you're calling in your relationship stuff, how often do you change your groups up? So like a corner group, it's like the left hand 4, and you get into a line. But do you sometimes get into something and say, well, I don't like that group, I'm going to form up a different group and go from there? I mean, you just change groups because you don't like what kind of group you got?
It depends. If at things like workshops, I don't usually worry too much about the groups until I'm looking to resolve. I do figure out the relationship group to help me resolve. But at a dance, if I'm doing something that's more of a theme or whatever, I do like to play with relationship groups that perhaps other dancers don't go to. I like to use the opposite lady group. You're not dancing with your corner. You're not dancing with your partner. You don't generally see them very much. And although it takes a little bit of getting used to, the rules that we use to sort of guide us when we're dancing in partners, like our partner is right next to us or our corner is adjacent, they're all upside down when you dance opposite lady. Your opposite lady is, when your partner is far away, then you've got opposite lady in hand. Instead of when your partner is close, you've got them. If you cannot touch your corner in a line of 4, you're in sequence. The rules are kind of just upside down in several ways. but once you get used to it, you can work in opposite lady as easily as you work in any other relationship group. And so you can give dancers kind of a different feeling by changing the groups, by changing who they dance with, and by not always sticking with the same set of 4 throughout a tip. It feels to the dancers like you're doing more than you necessarily are.
I
okay.
Go ahead, John.
I'll go, but yeah, but I was asking about is you have if you're in a corner box, you have the one group over there, but if you go with the near and the far group, you have a different kind of group. So I mean, do you just sometimes just look at them and find the group that you want to work with, or do you? I mean, you can divide them up in different ways, like a left group or the front group or the back group. Do you just find the group that you want to work with, or do you?
Sometimes.
Is there some rhyme or reason?
Sometimes, if I know I want to go from opposite lady to partner, okay, then what I'll do is put them into something like a facing line, and if I have partners in the same line of 4, then I'll do pass through, wheel, and deal. I'm in a partner formation, So, but if I didn't, then I might look at the box and maybe have the ladies chain and then get what I want. There are times I do the trick that we talked about of looking at lines versus boxes to switch in my mind, but oftentimes I just watch one group of dancers for the most part.
All right.
A talk that
That's just me.
A talk that I heard Jerry Story do someplace in the last 12 months, I think, was one of the things he concentrates on, and I think you're talking about this, Barry, is giving the dancers a different experience just by making sure they dance with these dancers in the square and then those dancers, not always near their partner and such.
And also not always on the same part of the floor.
And also changing the horizontal axis to the vertical axis and back and forth, which is what you're saying, not on the same part of the floor. And I got to admit, I never thought of that while calling. I just try to call material that's interesting and flowing and what have you. But I never thought too much about moving people around the square. And thinking further on that, I'm thinking back to my days of actively dancing a lot. I can't remember that I was aware of whether I was dancing with different people or not. And I danced to lots of different callers. So it would, if I was dancing with the same people all the time or along the same axis with some callers, it would have stood out more than others. So it's an interesting thing. And part of me wonders how important that is. It's an interesting concept. Any other thoughts on, as a dancer, do you notice that you're dancing with your partner all the time, or your corner, or moving around, or the time you really is progressive squares, but or with hexagons, there are more people to dance with. But
I don't think Don, I don't think dancers note exactly if they're dancing with their partner all the time. That's sort of a given. And they also note the mix up, and that usually happens, head square through, you're away from your partner, right off 2 of them anyway. They do note when they're dancing in the same spot of the floor all the time, and they do note if they're dancing with the same group of 4 all the time. But as to that actually partner related, because of the interaction between dancers is so quick, that part doesn't really come into it. But the same group of 4 and the same spot on the floor is really noticed by dancers.
I used to notice on singing calls. I'd get to promenade a different woman home, but that's another story.
I don't think dancers are very aware of people who they're not facing or next to. In other words, if you're in an ocean wave, for example, they are somewhat aware if they're holding on to their partner or something, but even that is not as clear to them as if they were facing the person, or if they were if they were a couple with the person. And as far as the other 2 people at the other end of the wave, I think they usually have no idea.
I think one of the things that dancers notice is, from any particular formation and arrangement, if the call that they're mentally expecting, because they've called one of 10 calls all the time. If you call a different call, you know, swing through centers instead of run, cross run, to a chain down the line. I don't know. They'll notice that's different, and there are two forms of that. It's different, and I can do this. This is cool, or it's different. What the heck is he talking about? Why did he call something too tough for me to dance? But not necessarily who you're dancing with. But I do look forward to trying to mix that whom you're dancing with a little also, just in case a few people are aware of it.
I was talking just a couple weeks ago with an old dance partner. This is a woman who she square danced for about maybe almost 10 years. And she hasn't been square dancing in, gosh, at least 25 or more years. And an old partner of mine. And we were talking about callers, and she said, I didn't grill her on it a lot, but she was saying that she definitely remembered some callers. It seemed like they were always calling the same patterns over and over again. And what it sounded to me like is people who just called a relatively limited set of modules or something, or whatever was going on there. She felt that they were just calling the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again all night long. And that it was really, really obvious when they were resolving and stuff like that. So they definitely notice things like that. And I mean, that's stuck in her mind as a difference between different callers.
So some dancers do note that. That's interesting. Sell it with the singing call. That's all right. Showmanship.
Chris,
the choreography is.
Your observation about the repetition of sequences of calls, I think dancers catch that quicker than about anything. And if you use the same center square through three to a corner, after about the third time or fourth time or 10th time, they kind of know what's coming when you do that. I don't think the dancers pay as much attention to who they're dancing with as far as relationship as we consider. I think they see places on the floor. Are we dancing at the sides? Are we dancing at the heads? And moving around. The geography, I think, means more to the dancers than who they're with, because as a dancer, I'm aware of it because I'm listening for it and looking for it. But the dancers as such, how many times have you? Well, I have a lot. Does anybody know where their corner is? And they're all looking at me like I should know.
I'll tell you, there are two things about that. First of all, when we do the usual get out, square through three, element left, and those kind of cliches, I don't think that dancers resent that at all. It's just something that's very familiar to them. And of course, you say square through three, and half the time they're thinking, oh yeah, we're in the middle, it's square through three. And they're kind of expecting to get their corner. And if they don't get it, they're probably surprised. But I don't think they feel bored by that. I think they just feel like, oh, it's the square through three. It's here we go to the corner, and that's how sequences end. They don't get any more bored with that than they do with, circle left or promenade home or anything like that. But and as far as people that they remember, they certainly, mostly what I call for are groups that are singles. Actually, that's not true anymore. I guess it's about 50-50 now. But anyway, in the singles and probably in the couples too. I mean, if you start to tip off by saying, everybody take a look at your corner and say hi to your corner and I'll see you soon, honey, or that kind of jazz, that definitely makes them remember their corner more than it would have.
The part of that square through three to the corner is a showmanship thing of not only is finding your real corner and your real partner, the dancers are amazed that you've been able to resolve the kaleidoscope mess, but that's part of the showmanship of building up to it. And I think a lot of callers can get excited or can get the dancers excited by it and others can't. As far as the relationship, I kind of agree with you, Howard, that they're more aware of the location on the floor and the formation changes than they are of the relationship. But as Barry was saying, it's not so much the relationship that we care about the dancers identifying with as much as it is giving us, the caller, a better grasp of how to keep track of what's going on in the square by knowing the relationship and being able to manipulate that to an Alaman left, or promenade home, or whatever kind of resolve they want. Or dance them for a while and then mix that relationship up once just to make it feel a little different. But it's more of a caller's tool than an entertainment tool, if I'm not mistaken, Barry.
Absolutely. Just one more tool in the toolbox.
We used to have to carry record cases. Now we can carry a thumb drive, but we have to carry a bigger toolbox because there are more tools to go around. Clark?
So the Square Dance Foundation of New England has a bunch of audio tapes of callers from even the 50s and 60s. And I got a bunch of those, and Sandy and I have danced some of those. We both enjoy dancing the older tapes. And this would be Earl Johnson, Al Brundage, et cetera, some old New England callers. It's certainly the case that the overall variety was not there. They occasionally had several different ways to get you to your corner, but he typically would theme for the whole tip one or two things he had discovered or wanted to show you choreographically, and then it would just be that over and over, but at a pretty brisk dance pace. And we found him, both of them, enjoyable to dance to. I did a presentation on that at Color Lab one time, where we tried to get a square of Color Lab callers up to dance this stuff. And it's always tough because people can't keep up with the pace of the choreography and the slight differences that we would do, along with, 5 calls I had to teach you that weren't used anymore. But I don't think in the old days the variety was there like we try to do it now.
I remember, Clark, the first time I danced to Earl Johnson, I'd heard how wonderful he was and what have you. And I wasn't that impressed with the dance until I found out that he'd been calling 52 nights in a row, and he was a little bit worn out that evening. I definitely enjoyed other dances of his I went to after that. Think of that, 52 nights in a row. Wow.
Those were the days.
Thinking of the enjoyable dances of old, the Winchester tapes are amazing. But you have to have the timing right, or you're dead.
Yet a different approach to entertainment, but it worked.
To me, it's amazing that dancers today want everything slowed down. And if you dance some of the old material, the speed at which the dance was called is tremendous. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing, and your placement has to be good. And I think that's one of the things that we don't teach dancers anymore is, it doesn't take 17 steps to go forward and back. And it's stuff like that that we're missing when we're teaching classes these days.
Sandy, I'm a big advocate of slower tempos, and maybe I'll preach my feelings on it sometime. But I remember the first time I went to a John Hendren workshop. Friends of mine were going regularly, and they said, "Come along, this is great." John used to call it really fast, 132, I don't know. In his later years, he called it about 118 really slowly. But that one I went to, I remember saying, great caller, great choreography, but I'll be darned if I'll come here for my aerobic exercise. I'll go someplace else for it. I didn't like the speed. I was aware that I was really having to physically push. And that probably shows up in the tapes of Hendren and Brundage also.
Mm-hmm.
One of the aspects that you're talking about, Sandy, which follows through, there was a tendency of, to make things more interesting or to make it sound hype, you'd speed it up as opposed to getting to dance to the music and fill it up with actual choreography that works with the music. Dancing smoothly without the breaks, or dancing smoothly where you have a square through being 12 from a static square or 10 from a square or from a box, giving him that amount of music to do it and having the timing and the flow made for fast dancing, whether or not you were at 122 or at 132. But what happened was the choreography didn't change. All you did was speed up the delivery. In a lot of cases, fast callers didn't change the music or the tempo of the music. They just called, clipping the calls. So you got 8 music beats to do a 12 beat call, and that caused the dancers to run. And that continues today with this massive idiocy, and I'll say it blatantly, this massive idiocy of saying, let's get dancers on the floor and get them dancing and graduating and dancing a full program in 10 weeks or 12 weeks. Well, you can do that on night 1. If you get them moving to the music, they'll have fun and carry through and dance for 2 or 3 years and then graduate basic. But if they're moving to the music comfortably, they're going to have fun. They'll come back because that's a program they want. Don, you hit the nail on the head saying, I'll be damned if I'm going to come here for my aerobics. I'm also going to be damned if I'm going to come there to learn how to use a walker.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not saying that back in the day when they were calling ridiculous speeds, that was the right thing to do. What I do hear these days, though, is callers who, the dancers may be dancing to the music, but the caller is giving you stop and start.
Yep.
And that is what, to me, takes away from the danceability. I mean, I was taught, when Swarzy taught me how to call, she said, as a dancer, and she and Deuce said, as a dancer, you should never stop walking. You should never have to run, but you should never stop moving.
Yep.
So if the delivery is there from the caller, you're still moving to the music, but you're never stopping.
Sandy, one of the presentations I did here many moons ago was on smooth dancing and all the different components of it. Timing is one, body flow is one, hand availability is one,
yes,
tempo is one, dancer knowledge is, and you've got to have them all right to make it smooth dancing, and you've got to learn how to, and I don't remember how much detail I went into on each of them because each of them is a total topic on its own. But they've all got to be right. And if you see your dancers stopping and going, it's up to you to figure out, is it because of their knowledge? Is it because of timing? Is it because of body flow? And you got to pick out, figure out which one it is, correct that aspect of it and everything. But I like what you said, what Swarzy and Deuce said is the dancers want to keep walking, keep moving. And it's your responsibility to let them do that, to help them to do that.
Yeah. I think going to a dance, I don't get tired if I'm dancing to a caller who keeps me moving. I don't have to run or whatever, but a caller who keeps me moving, I can dance to even if I'm tired, if I'm exhausted. The stop start thing is like, okay, forget it. I'm going to sit down. That's exactly my feeling behind that.
Sandy, one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten, I've mentioned this on occasion because I'm proud of it, but I was calling up in Maine, and by the 4th or 5th or 6th tip, some older gentleman came up to me and he said, boy, do you call fast. And of course the hairs on the back of my neck went up because I know I do a very slow tempo relative to most callers. But what he was thinking of as interpreting as fast as close timing. And he said, but you know, I'm an old guy and I usually have to sit out every other tip or every third tip to catch my breath. And I've been dancing all evening and I still feel great. And it was a matter of not having that stop and go that tires you out, like you were just talking about. And it made me feel so good. I'm still talking about it decades later.
I had an almost identical experience, probably with a different old guy, but also but it was in Massachusetts and down in the southern part of the state. And I was there calling. I called. I think I just called a tip. I was at somebody's dance. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, so I called in the way that I typically do, and this extremely old geezer guy. Of course, at the time what this story is taking place, probably 28 years old. So this ancient guy comes up and he's like, "Oh man, you call fast." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, it's great. It's just like the old days."
Interesting.
And I just need to add on to that, Chris. Now they're telling that same story, but you're the old geezer in the story.
Chris is just a kid. I just wrote down tempo. I think I may do my tempo thing. I see Dan groaning. No, not quite, but because I gave him a lot of good reasons to slow his tempo down, and I don't think he really changed his tempo at all due to what I said. But at least it started a friendship.
I became and I became more comfortable with sticking around 126 than pushing it all the way up to the 132, 134 that I hear when I listen to Buddy Weaver's podcasts of the old dancers from the 60s or the old callers from the 60s.
And I'm still around 120 or 122, but maybe we'll talk about that soon. It'll bring up a good discussion, and I've got 10 or 15 minutes worth of giving you my 2 cents worth on pros and cons of it and how to compensate. Clark?
So I just wanted to point out that contra dancing typically would be in the 118 to 122 beats per minute range. Modern Western squares might be, well, we think of 128 as, quote, the standard. And so maybe 124 to 132 range. So they barely overlap, and contra dancing is slower. And contra dancing has the same moves, right and left through, ladies chain, square throughs. They might have different names, stars, circles, and a reasonable amount of swing your partner and swing your neighbor. Contra dancing is much more aerobic than modern Western square dancing. So it's odd that the tempo is lower, but because you're constantly moving, you're using more energy. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's an odd thing, but I believe it to be
almost an oxymoron. Not quite.
It actually makes sense because kinesthetically, most contras is based on a repetitive 8-beat phrase. Everything that goes in, you're doing with 8 steps, and most aerobics or anaerobics are based on that same kind of rhythm of a repetitive cadence, whereas modern square dancing is 2, 3, 5, 7, 1. And it's such an eclectic mix of it, even though you can continuously be moving. It's that repetitive, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8 constant that goes through, which gives it that aerobic feel that you develop that cadence and that rhythm of repetitive action through it that doesn't happen in square dancing, or modern square dancing.
For those of you that eventually will see that I'm doing something on tempo and thinking, oh, that's too small a piece, and he's only got his opinions, just to let you know, I've been thinking about it for years. Many years ago, I actually I'm trying to talk you guys into coming. But many years ago, I actually got Jim Mayo and myself talking, and we set up a workshop with 6 of our local callers, all good callers, some known to call very slowly, some known to call kind of fast, 4 good squares of dancers that weren't stumbling because we kept it to plus, but they were all pretty strong A1 dancers. And we tried a whole bunch of different experiments, and I will be talking about that and showing what reactions and such. There's a lot to just tempo.
Oh yeah. It was
So-
one of the topics that come up, and it ended up with a 6-hour discussion after it, and it wasn't even finished. So if you can do that in one 1-hour session, I will be impressed.
Well, I can give you my opinions in probably half an hour or less, but I'm sure as we've been over 2 hours now that this group tends to love to discuss things, which is, I think, one of the features.
Hey, back to the relationships. I had a suggestion for some of the beginners who are trying to get a handle on how to look at that, and it is involving using terminations. You can change the colors of the dancers around in terminations, as you probably know. And when they start out, they're color grouped so that it's your partners that's together. But what you might do is make half of the dancers just some neutral color, and then pick out for one for the other half, color them not according to partners, but color them according to say right hand ladies or corners, and then just look at those as you go along, and kind of see how those move around. When you want to see what the opposite people are doing, so that you can see the effect of, if I have this, then the other side must be that, then you have one set of colors you can look at, and then another set of sort of neutral people that won't be distracting you the rest of the time, but you can go and look back at them at any time and see. But anyway, changing around the colors to be something other than the partner relationship is my suggestion for playing with terminations.
Terminations really helps in a lot of ways. That's one way for sight calling, resolving. 2 neutral couples and 2 adjacent couples have their own different colors, and for mental image, 7 neutral colors and 1 active dancer. Terminations has really been an amazing tool for all of us.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have it. I would definitely not do the partner coloring at all. I would make the red people would be your right hand lady relationship.
I was saying, Chris, for sight calling resolve practice, you would do that. For the relationship kind of stuff that Barry is talking about, that we're supposedly talking about this Saturday, there it's a good thing to couple, to pair different relationships and colors and work with them.
Yeah, I know when people are when beginners are looking at even terminations, let alone real dancers, what they see is a lot of boxes and numbers flying around, and that can be even with the partner coloring, for example, that can be kind of confusing. So I think the trick is to turn off almost all the colors except for just a few dancers that you want to look at, and in this case it would not be the partners necessarily, or it might be partners and right hand ladies and that sort of thing. So if you think if your usual way of sight calling is to look at like the number 4 couple and the number 1 couple, you might look at the number 1 couple and the number 2 couple, and rather than have the blue people be the number 1 partners, have the blue people be the same color in the number 1 and the number 2. Number 1 man, number 2 lady, for example, could be, they could be the red people, and then the other 2 people could be maybe the blue people or something.
So Barry, when you have a practice square and the pennies you were showing us, do you at some point say, hold it, and you go switch the pennies around when you're working with a different relationship? You're muted, Barry.
That would take a little too long to have them switch around. But what I often do is just as I'm working with newer callers and looking to help them, I'll successively remove some of the vest, essentially making the dancers unidentifiable and getting them to focus on fewer people at a time.
That I really wasn't expecting, because that would mess up the timing that Sandy was talking about. But, but as I'd said, we've got to work at one piece at a time of this multifaceted sport we have called calling. I'm thinking that conversation is getting kind of slow, and maybe it's time for me to bow out. And once again, thanks, Barry, for agreeing to do this. And for doing it, not only agreeing, but doing it. And
it's been a pleasure and an honor.
Keeping people interested. Yes, Clark, thanks for the lead on that. And Dan, again, for hosting and recording and eventually posting. And with that, I'm going to bow out, guys, and we'll see you the next session, I guess. Take care, Sandy. Bye.
And I think I will tackle all this. Barry, one quick question. Can you email me that presentation? Because a couple people mentioned that they'd love to have it.
And like at flutterby.com should be there.
That would be the one. Now I'm seeing the chat. Yes. Yes, that would be the one.
Now that's the PowerPoint deck, because it was small. When I tried to eat a PDF, it was huge, like 37 megabytes.
Yeehaw!
I can take the color out of there and probably make that much smaller if PDF would be preferable.
You know, these days I suspect everybody can read PowerPoint. If not, I'll teach you how to use LibreOffice, and we'll make it work. So
very good.
Cool.
Barry, do you have a link to your quote free book?
There's a few different copies around. It's on Vic and Debbie Cedar's website. It's also in the Caller Lab knowledge base. If you go to knowledge.callerlab.org and search for relationships, it's one of the links that pops up right away.
Thank you.
Just giggling over searching the Caller Lab knowledge base for relationships, but well, I think with that, I too will get on with my day. If people are, normally I'll just leave the room open if people want to chat, but I think we've kind of run it out. So thank you again, Barry.
Very good. Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Bye all.
Take care, everybody.